In the vastness of space, humanity had long believed that it was at the top of the cosmic ladder. People spoke of humans as clever, adaptable, and unmatched in intelligence, ingenuity, and ambition. For centuries, explorers and scientists had expanded the reach of human colonies across dozens of star systems, spreading technology, culture, and influence. Ships traveled light years in weeks. Cities rose on barren planets with advanced life support systems, and humans constantly adapted to environments that would have killed their ancestors. There was a sense, almost a quiet arrogance, that no matter how strange or dangerous the universe became, humans would always find a way to conquer, survive, and thrive. This belief was deeply ingrained not just in military leaders or explorers, but in ordinary people who saw humanity as the apex species of the known galaxy. But even in this age of technological marvels and interstellar travel, there were corners of the galaxy where humans did not tread, where rumors persisted about beings that could survive what humans could barely imagine. Among the most legendary of these were the Deathworlders. For centuries, tales of their resilience circulated in human records, some written by scientists, others passed as folklore among pilots and adventurers. The Deathworlders were not merely survivors, they were masters of death itself. Their worlds were extreme in every possible way. Temperatures that could boil blood or freeze it instantly, storms that shredded metal ships, landscapes filled with poisonous flora, and predators designed by evolution to hunt anything that moved. To live on a death world meant to exist constantly on the edge of death. To have instincts honed by an environment that demanded perfection in every movement and decision. Humans had always been fascinated by these stories. Some regarded the death with fear, imagining creatures larger than humans with deadly claws or tentacles capable of killing without effort. Others, particularly scientists and military strategists, saw an opportunity. If humans could study or interact with the Deathworlders, perhaps they could learn their secrets, understand how life could adapt to unimaginable dangers, and even claim a place among these apex species. Still, there was caution. No human expedition had ever returned with more than fragmented reports, and those who had spoken often hinted at horrors that made the bravest pause. Many dismissed the rumors as exaggerations, tales for entertainment, or cautionary legends to prevent reckless adventurers from venturing too far. Despite these warnings, the human ego, combined with scientific curiosity, could not be restrained forever. A new expedition was planned, bold, daring, and unprecedented in ambition. Scientists, explorers, and a small contingent of military advisors were chosen. Their mission was clear: find the Deathworlders, study them, and determine if humans could survive, and perhaps even thrive, alongside them. Equipment was prepared for every conceivable danger: reinforced suits to withstand temperature extremes, shields against storms and radiation, and advanced sensors to detect threats. Yet, no amount of technology could fully prepare them for the world they were about to enter. Even the best simulations on Earth could not replicate the living, breathing chaos of a Deathworld planet. As the human ships approached the first Deathworld system, the sense of anticipation grew. The crew observed the planet from orbit, seeing landscapes unlike anything they had ever encountered. Mountains rose jaggedly, sharp enough to pierce clouds, and deep valleys were carved as if by massive claws. Thick clouds roiled constantly. In the atmosphere, lightning striking the surface with terrifying regularity. Below, hints of movement suggested life forms adapted to survive in a world designed to kill anything weaker. The crew was both awed and unnerved. For some, it was a dream realized, a chance to see the universe in a way that few humans ever would. For others, the reality was sobering. They understood, even without leaving orbit, that this was a place where human arrogance could be punished easily, where mistakes could be fatal. The Deathworlders themselves were aware of the approaching humans. Unlike humans, their survival depended on keen perception, instincts honed over countless generations, and an intimate understanding of every rock, storm, and predator on their planet. They observed from a distance at first, curious about these new arrivals who carried strange machines that moved unnaturally and made sounds that seemed absurdly loud. The Deathworlders were intelligent but patient. They had seen invaders before, creatures from other worlds who underestimated the planet. Those invaders often failed to understand that power in this environment was not about strength alone. A wrong step could mean death. A moment of hesitation could be fatal. Watching the humans, the Deathworlders could immediately sense both opportunity and danger. Humans began landing small reconnaissance teams, each step taken with extreme caution. Even on the surface, the planet tested them in unexpected ways. Storms erupted without warning, thick acidic mists burned their suits, and the ground beneath their feet was often unstable. Sensors were thrown off by magnetic anomalies, and even minor injuries became dangerous when resources were limited. Every decision had consequences, and every movement demanded thought and precision. The Deathworlders observed silently, almost invisibly. They did not rush to attack. Survival itself was a strategy, and humans were testing themselves against forces they barely understood. The interactions, though minimal at first, were profoundly revealing. Humans noticed strange patterns in the environment, rocks that seemed to move slightly as if avoiding their footsteps, strange sounds that suggested intelligence in creatures hiding in the distance, and glimpses of figures that moved with unnatural grace. The Deathworlders were masters of camouflage, their bodies perfectly adapted to survive both the environment and any predator. Humans, relying on technology and logical thinking, struggled to interpret the signs. Every step forward became an exercise in humility, as they began to realize that this planet did not conform to human expectations. The natural laws were twisted by evolution, and survival required more than just brains or weapons. It required instinct, adaptability, and respect for life forms that had dominated death for millennia. As the first days turned into weeks, the human team began to form an understanding of the Deathworlders not as monsters, but as survivors, strategists, and apex beings. Their bodies were powerful, yes, but it was their minds, their intuition, and their culture of survival that truly set them apart. Every creature, every plant, every shift in the environment seemed to have a purpose, a lesson in resilience. Humans recorded data meticulously, yet each observation reinforced a humbling truth. Survival on this planet was not a test of strength alone. It was a test of perception, patience, and respect. Every mistake could be fatal, and every moment of arrogance was a lesson in mortality. Even among themselves, humans began to change. Confidence gave way to caution, and curiosity was tempered with careful study. They debated strategies, shared observations, and reflected on what it meant to challenge a species so perfectly adapted to its world. For many, the expedition was no longer about proving dominance, it was about understanding. Each human came to realize that in a universe full of wonders and dangers, being at the top of the food chain was temporary unless tempered by wisdom. They began to see the Deathworlders not as enemies or curiosities, but as teachers, examples of what life could achieve when shaped by relentless challenges. The expedition marked a turning point in human thought about the galaxy. Until then, humans had assumed that intelligence and technology were ultimate measures of superiority, but facing the Deathworlders, they confronted a reality where adaptability, instinct, and environment shaped the apex species. The humans realized that they had been challenged, not through violence but through a subtle, enduring test of skill, patience, and humility. The Deathworlders did not need to attack to prove their supremacy. They merely existed, thrived, and observed. In every cautious movement, every failed attempt to predict the environment, humans learned a profound lesson. Survival was more than weapons or machines. It was the ability to read the world, respect it, and adapt faster than any threat could strike. By the end of the first part of the mission, humans had gained a new perspective on themselves and the universe. They were explorers, yes, and survivors, but the galaxy was vast, full of life forms far more capable than they had ever imagined. The Deathworlders remained a symbol of ultimate survival, a species whose very existence challenged human arrogance. And while humans had set out to test themselves against these apex beings, they were the ones being tested not in combat, but in wisdom, perception, and the humility necessary to survive in a galaxy that would not bend to human will. The stage was set for what was to come. Humans had glimpsed the raw power of life perfectly attuned to its environment. They understood now that any challenge in this part of the galaxy would demand respect, strategy, and patience. The Death were more than apex predators, they were a mirror, reflecting humanity's strengths, weaknesses, and the thin line between confidence and hubris. In the silent, harsh landscapes of the Deathworld planets, humans had already begun to learn their first and most important lesson. The universe did not yield to arrogance, and every step forward would require not just courage, but understanding. The human team had stepped onto the surface of the Deathworld, and every moment after that tested their assumptions about survival, skill, and the limits of technology. What had begun as a mission of exploration quickly shifted into a challenge of endurance. The planet itself seemed alive, not in the sense of flora and fauna alone, but in the way every rock, storm, and wind pattern appeared to respond to the human's presence. Even the most advanced sensors often failed, giving distorted readings or alerting to dangers that did not exist while ignoring hazards that were deadly. The crew soon realized that they were in a world where nothing behaved according to the rules they had learned on Earth. Gravity, weather, and terrain were unpredictable, constantly demanding vigilance. From the very first day, the humans encountered environmental hazards unlike anything they had prepared for. Acidic mists clung to their suits, corroding even the strongest protective layers. Electrical storms struck without warning, sometimes discharging bolts that could cut through reinforced metal, forcing the humans to scramble for shelter in terrain that offered little safety. The ground beneath their feet was often unstable. Rocks could crumble without notice, creating sudden chasms or sending explorers tumbling into ravines. Temperatures fluctuated wildly. In one moment, they would face scorching heat that made breathing difficult, and in the next, sudden freezing winds would threaten hypothermia. Every step forward demanded calculation and care. Yet there was little time to hesitate, for the planet was unforgiving of indecision. Despite these dangers, the humans pressed on. The team divided into smaller scouting parties, each assigned to map the landscape, collect samples, and attempt first-hand observations of the Deathworlders. It quickly became evident that their usual reliance on technology was only partially effective. Sensors could detect movement, but they could not interpret the patterns, the intent, or the camouflage of the native lifeform. Drones could explore inaccessible areas, but many were destroyed by environmental hazards, their valuable data lost. Even the strongest weapons seemed almost irrelevant in the face of a planet that could itself kill in seconds. Humans realized they could not simply dominate this world, they had to adapt to it, a process far more difficult than any training or simulation on Earth had taught them. The Deathworlders watched silently from a distance. At first, they did not approach, understanding that observation was often more powerful than direct action. Their worlds had shaped them into patient predators, capable of assessing a situation, predicting outcomes, and striking only when it would guarantee survival or advantage. When humans moved into areas considered sacred or dangerous, the Deathworlders tested them not with overwhelming force, but with subtle obstacles. Paths that seemed open would collapse. Predators would appear in unexpected places. Food and water sources seemed reliable but were laced with challenges that forced humans to improvise. Every interaction was a lesson, an invisible hand shaping the humans' understanding of the planet's true power. As days turned into weeks, internal tensions began to rise within the human group. Not everyone adapted at the same rate. Some explorers grew frustrated with the constant delays, the destruction of equipment, and the relentless threat of danger. They blamed the team leaders for what they saw as poor planning. Underestimating the Deathworlders' influence on the environment, arguments broke out over strategy, risk, and the value of continuing the mission. Others became more cautious, advocating for observation and patience over action. These disagreements created an undercurrent of tension, as humans not only battled the planet's physical challenges but also their own emotions, doubts, and ego. The Deathworlders, ever observant, seemed almost to understand these dynamics. Watching as humans struggled with coordination and morale, encounters with the Deathworlders themselves began to increase. At first, humans caught only glimpses, figures moving between rocks with impossible speed, shapes blending perfectly with the terrain. The first close encounter was almost fatal. A scouting party stumbled into a narrow canyon, only to find themselves surrounded by Deathworlders whose movements were precise, silent, and lethal. The humans attempted to defend themselves with weapons, but their blaster shots were dodged with unnatural agility. The Deathworlders did not attack indiscriminately. Rather, they demonstrated their dominance by forcing humans into strategic retreats, guiding them away without direct confrontation. It was a humbling experience. Humans had believed they could face any life form with superior firepower, but they realized that sheer force was not enough here. The humans began to adapt slowly. Leaders emphasized patience, observation, and learning from each encounter. Every Deathworlder movement was analyzed, every environmental cue studied. Humans experimented with new strategies, moving silently, observing predator patterns, and using the terrain creatively instead of attempting to control it with brute force. Even small victories like navigating a canyon safely or avoiding a trap felt monumental. These successes taught humans that survival depended on understanding the ecosystem, predicting the Deathworlders' behavior, and adapting in real time. It was a lesson in humility. The apex predators of this world did not need to prove their dominance by violence. Their mere existence, their mastery of every challenge, was proof enough. Resource management became another critical challenge. Humans carried supplies, but the planet's extreme conditions quickly depleted them. Water sources were contaminated or hazardous, food was scarce, and medical supplies were limited. Injuries, even minor ones, became serious problems. Infections developed rapidly, and the stress of constant danger took a toll on both body and mind. Teams had to learn how to ration, improvise, and rely on each other in ways they had never needed before. Trust and cooperation became essential. A single careless mistake could end a mission or a life. The Deathworlders, through their subtle manipulations of the environment, seemed to test not just the humans' skills, but their resilience, teamwork, and ingenuity. One of the most revealing aspects of the challenge was the planet itself. The humans quickly realized that this was not merely a backdrop for conflict, it was an active participant. Gravity anomalies made movement unpredictable. Volcanic activity could erupt at any time. Flora and fauna were both deadly and strangely intelligent in behavior. That humans learned that navigating this world required more than maps and calculations. It required intuition, a keen awareness of patterns, and the ability to make split-second decisions. The Deathworlders' advantage was not just physical power, but a lifetime of adaptation to these hazards. Every human misstep highlighted the gap between brute force and survival intelligence. Despite all these difficulties, curiosity remained a powerful motivator. Scientists on the team were fascinated by the Deathworlders' physiology, their ability to endure and thrive, and their interactions with the planet. Explorers were drawn to the thrill of the unknown, to the challenge of overcoming dangers that seemed insurmountable. Military advisors, while cautious, were intrigued by the tactical lessons to be learned. Slowly, a new kind of respect developed among the humans. They were beginning to see the Deathworlders not as mere obstacles, but as teachers, exemplars of what life could achieve when every aspect of existence was honed by extreme conditions. The humans' perception of the mission shifted. It was no longer about conquest or proving superiority, but about learning, surviving, and understanding. Communication among the human teams became crucial. Constant updates, sharing of observations, and discussion of strategies helped prevent mistakes and improve survival rates. Yet even with coordination, uncertainty remained. The Deathworlders' intelligence and subtle influence over the environment meant that humans could never feel completely secure. Every day brought a new lesson in adaptability. A seemingly safe path could become a death trap. A predator could appear where none were expected, and natural phenomena could challenge the best-laid plans. Humans learned to anticipate danger, respect the environment, and react with flexibility rather than rigid strategy. As the first phase of the mission continued, it became clear that the Deathworlders had not merely survived, they had mastered the planet. Their movements, behaviors, and interactions demonstrated a level of adaptation far beyond human expectations. They were not just creatures of strength. They were strategists, teachers, and apex beings whose mastery of their world was absolute. Humans began to internalize this lesson. They realized that dominance in any world was not guaranteed by technology or physical strength, but by understanding, observation, and the ability to adapt faster than threats could strike. By the end of this part of the mission, humans had been transformed. Confidence and arrogance gave way to caution, respect, and humility. They had learned that survival on a death world demanded patience, intelligence, and a constant willingness to learn. Every mistake was costly, every encounter revealing the profound gap between human assumptions and the reality of life in extreme conditions. That humans now understood that the Deathworlders were more than mere legends. They were the living embodiment of evolution perfected under the harshest circumstances. The stage was set for the next phase of their journey. Humans were no longer naive explorers expecting to conquer or dominate. They had faced the rising challenges of the planet, adapted under pressure, and survived encounters that could have ended disastrously. Yet they also knew that the Deathworlders were watching, assessing, and waiting. The challenge was far from over. Each step forward would require ingenuity, courage, and a profound respect for beings who had proven themselves masters of survival. Humans had learned the first critical lesson of life on a death world. Strength alone was meaningless without understanding, and arrogance could be fatal in a world that tested every limit of body, mind, and spirit. As the humans continued their expedition on the death world, the sense of danger intensified. What had begun as an effort to explore and study a mysterious alien species evolved into a situation that tested not only their physical skills but their ability to make decisions under extreme pressure. The Deathworlders had watched the humans carefully, analyzing their strengths, weaknesses, and patterns. For every cautious step the humans took, the Deathworlders had observed, adapted, and predicted outcomes with astonishing precision. But humans were starting to realize that they were not simply facing a hostile environment, they were facing intelligent beings who had mastered survival in a way that humans could barely comprehend. The turning point began unexpectedly. A scouting team had moved deeper into a dense forest region, following what appeared to be a safe path based on the topography and previous observations. The forest was unlike anything humans had encountered. Trees with thick, twisted branches blocked sunlight, while vines and undergrowth moved subtly, reacting to their presence. Strange sounds echoed from the distance, some mechanical, others organic, but all carried the weight of caution. Initially, the team believed these sounds came from natural phenomena, but gradually they began to notice patterns. Movements in the shadows were too deliberate, too coordinated to be mere animals. The humans were entering the Deathworlders' sacred territory, a region rarely approached by any species due to its complexity and danger. At first, the humans believed their technology would keep them safe. Sensors scanned the area constantly, drones flew ahead to detect hazards, and weapons were primed for rapid response. Yet the Deathworlders seemed to anticipate each move. Drones would malfunction unexpectedly, sensors would misread the environment, and pathways that appeared solid would collapse underfoot. It was as if the very land had been engineered to challenge them. The humans tried to compensate with calculations and logic, but the Deathworlders' understanding of the terrain, combined with instinctual knowledge passed through generations, allowed them to stay one step ahead. Humans began to feel that no amount of preparation could fully prepare them for this confrontation. The critical moment came when the humans unknowingly crossed into a zone considered sacred to the Deathworlders. Immediately, subtle signs indicated that they had been noticed. Trees and vegetation shifted in unnatural ways, guiding humans toward more hazardous routes. Strange predator calls echoed in patterns designed to confuse and intimidate. The humans, now realizing that they had triggered a response, attempted to backtrack, but every move seemed anticipated. Panic began to set in for some members of the team, while others tried to maintain calm, recognizing that irrational decisions could be fatal. The tension reached its peak when figures emerged from the shadows, Deathworlders appearing not as monsters, but as perfectly adapted beings, moving with grace and speed that humans could not match. The humans attempted to defend themselves with weapons, but the Deathworlders did not attack aggressively. Instead, they demonstrated control, showing that every movement, every step, and every decision was under their mastery. Humans fired, but the Deathworlders dodged with precision, using the environment to their advantage. Rocks, trees, and terrain features became tools in a complex game of survival. The humans quickly realized that brute force alone would not succeed. This moment marked a turning point in understanding. The Deathworlders' superiority was not merely physical, but intellectual and instinctual. They were teaching humans a harsh but invaluable lesson about strategy, patience, and respect for the environment. One human leader, observing the unfolding events, had an important realization. He noticed that the team's initial approach relying on weapons and technology was flawed. Survival on this planet required thinking differently, abandoning assumptions of dominance, and embracing adaptability. Every action needed to be calculated not just for immediate effect, but with consideration of consequences. The team had to move with the understanding that the Deathworlders could predict human patterns, respond faster than humans could anticipate, and manipulate the terrain subtly to maintain control. This realization was sobering, but it shifted the humans' mindset from one of confrontation to one of adaptation. In the following days, the humans began to implement new strategies. They focused on observation rather than aggression, using stealth, careful movement, and attention to environmental cues. Every encounter with the Deathworlders became a lesson in patience and intelligence. Humans learned to watch patterns of movement, predict potential hazards, and adjust their behavior in response. Small successes, like avoiding a trap or navigating a dangerous canyon, became milestones that boosted morale and reinforced the importance of strategy over brute force. These experiences taught humans that survival was not about being stronger or faster. It was about thinking differently and respecting the intelligence of their opponents. The Death, in turn, seemed to test the humans deliberately. Their presence became more apparent, but attacks were precise, controlled, and often indirect. It was never about defeating humans outright, but about demonstrating mastery and teaching lessons through challenge. Humans began to recognize subtle patterns in behavior. Understanding that the Deathworlders' methods were deeply rooted in survival instincts refined over generations. Each encounter revealed that intelligence, adaptation, and respect for the environment were far more important than technology alone. Humans were learning, but the cost of each lesson was high. Mistakes could lead to injury, equipment loss, or near-death experiences. Internal dynamics among the humans also changed during this phase. Initially, frustration and fear had caused tension within the team, but the shared challenges began to foster cooperation and trust. Members had to rely on each other's strengths, communicate clearly, and make collective decisions quickly. Mistakes could no longer be ignored or blamed on luck. They had consequences. Leaders encouraged critical thinking, problem-solving, and careful planning. These adjustments were necessary not only for survival but also for understanding the true nature of the Death. The humans began to see themselves as students in a harsh but invaluable classroom where every mistake was a lesson in humility and adaptation. The humans also encountered unexpected allies in the environment. Certain natural formations and creatures, when observed carefully, provided clues about navigation, safety, and the presence of the Death. Humans learned to read the environment like a living map, recognizing patterns, interpreting sounds, and predicting movements. Each day brought small victories, from avoiding dangerous predators to successfully navigating previously impassable terrain. These victories reinforced the lesson that intelligence and careful observation were as important as physical strength. Humans began to develop a new kind of respect for life on the Death World, understanding that every creature, every hazard, and every Deathworlder movement had a purpose at the same time. Humans realized that they were being challenged not just physically but psychologically. The constant threat, the unpredictability of the environment, and the observation by the Deathworlders tested their patience, courage, and decision-making. Sleep became scarce, stress levels rose, and minor injuries felt magnified under the harsh conditions. Yet, these trials also forged resilience. Humans adapted to the mental challenges by developing routines, focusing on careful planning, and maintaining communication. The Deathworlders' presence served as a constant reminder that arrogance and overconfidence could lead to disaster. But humans learned that humility, awareness, and adaptability were essential tools for survival. The turning point was solidified when a major confrontation occurred in a canyon system, one of the most dangerous regions of the Deathworld. Humans entered cautiously, hoping to map the terrain and observe Deathworlder behavior. What began as a routine survey turned into a test of survival. The canyon's narrow passages, sudden drops, and treacherous surfaces made movement difficult, while the Deathworlders' presence was suddenly unmistakable. Figures appeared in the shadows, moving with precision, blocking exits, and forcing humans to think strategically. The humans realized that this was not merely a physical challenge. It was a test of their ability to apply everything they had learned. They had to anticipate, adapt, and cooperate perfectly to avoid disaster. Through careful observation and quick thinking, the humans managed to navigate the canyon, avoiding direct confrontation while learning more about the Deathworlders' sisters' strategies. This experience underscored the lesson that survival was a balance of caution and calculated risk. Humans began to understand that the Deathworlders' mastery was not about brute strength but about control, awareness, and adaptability. Every decision mattered, every action had consequences, and every step forward required respect for the environment and its apex inhabitants. By the end of this confrontation, humans had not only survived but had gained critical insights into how to interact with the Deathworlders effectively. The turning point also marked a shift in human perspective. What had started as a mission to observe, challenge, and possibly dominate was now seen as a profound learning experience. Humans understood that they were being measured, tested, and taught by a species that had perfected survival in ways humans could only aspire to. Their arrogance had been tempered by experience, and their confidence was now grounded in respect, observation, and careful strategy. They realized that true dominance in the galaxy was never guaranteed. It depended on intelligence, adaptability, and humility in the face of beings and environments that refused to conform to human expectations. By the end of this phase, the humans had learned perhaps their most important lesson yet. The Deathworlders were not just opponents, they were living examples of survival perfected under extreme conditions. Humans had to rethink every assumption about superiority, technology, and strategy. They understood now that they could never underestimate the power of instinct, adaptation, and environmental mastery. The turning point had shifted the human expedition from one of confidence to one of respect, from confrontation to understanding, and from recklessness to careful, strategic adaptation. Humans had been tested in ways they could not have imagined, and they were beginning to grow, both as individuals and as a team, in response to a species that had already proven itself at the pinnacle of survival. The culmination of the expedition approached as the humans ventured into the heart of the Death, a region that was the most dangerous and unforgiving part of the planet. Here the terrain became a living labyrinth. Jagged cliffs, deep chasms, and twisting canyons stretched as far as the eye could see. The environment itself seemed almost sentient, responding to their movements in ways that made every step unpredictable. Lightning streaked across dark clouds, reflecting off sheer rock walls, while winds howled through the valleys with a force capable of knocking an unprepared person off balance. This central region was where the Deathworlders were at their most dominant. Every aspect of the land, the shadows, the natural obstacles, and the flora and fauna worked in perfect harmony with the Deathworlders' instincts and abilities. Humans were entering a gauntlet designed not just to challenge them, but to test their ability to survive and adapt under extreme pressure. As the humans navigated the treacherous terrain, the Deathworlders began to make their presence unmistakably clear. At first, they appeared almost silently, moving in ways that were both deliberate and invisible. Their bodies blended with the environment flawlessly. Their movements were fluid, calculated, and perfectly timed to exploit the terrain. Humans could only catch glimpses, shadowy figures darting across ledges, the faint reflection of eyes in the dim light, or a blur of motion as a predator-like creature disappeared into the rocks. Each encounter tested the human's perception, reflexes, and nerves. The Deathworlders did not attack recklessly. Instead, they manipulated the human's path, guiding them through dangerous zones and forcing them to make rapid decisions under pressure. Every choice the humans made had immediate consequences, emphasizing the harsh lesson that intelligence, awareness, and adaptability were far more valuable than raw strength or weaponry. The humans' equipment, while advanced, was not infallible. Blasters and shields were effective against direct threats, but the environment continuously undermined their utility. Rocks shifted unexpectedly, creating pitfalls. Acidic mists and sudden temperature fluctuations strained the suits and life support systems. Communication devices occasionally failed, leaving small teams isolated in areas where split-second decisions could mean life or death. Even simple navigation was a challenge. Landmarks shifted in perception, and shadows played tricks on the human eye. Every moment demanded intense concentration, quick thinking, and the ability to trust instincts honed under constant pressure. It became clear that survival depended on the human's ability to work as a cohesive unit, anticipate threats, and respect the rules of the Deathworlders' domain. The most significant confrontation came when a human squad entered a massive canyon that served as a natural arena for apex predators. The walls were steep and jagged, creating a series of narrow passages and sudden drops. The Deathworlders, as if anticipating human movement, positioned themselves strategically, from above, from the sides, and from hidden crevices. They observed the humans' progress, using subtle signals and minimal movement to guide the humans' actions without immediate aggression. The humans initially felt a sense of panic. Their instincts screamed danger, and the narrow confines of the canyon made escape difficult. However, they quickly realized that reacting impulsively could be more dangerous than any external threat. Deliberate action, observation, and coordination became their primary tools. The humans attempted several tactics. They tried to rely on technology scanners, drones, and weapons to predict and counter the Deathworlders' movements. Yet the Deathworlders' intimate understanding of the environment allowed them to bypass technological advantage. Drones crashed or were misdirected, and sensors provided false readings, creating confusion that forced humans to think creatively. Weapons proved limited. The Deathworlders were agile, strategic, and careful, striking only when it maximized their advantage. Each confrontation highlighted a lesson that humans had been learning gradually. Brute force alone could not ensure survival. Victory was not measured by dominance, but by the ability to adapt, understand the environment, and respond intelligently to a superior predator. The humans quickly adapted to these challenges. They began to analyze the Deathworlders' behavior carefully, noting patterns, timing, and reactions. Small maneuvers such as changing routes, using the terrain creatively, and splitting attention across multiple tasks became crucial. Every successful movement reinforced the idea that strategy, observation, and cooperation were more valuable than strength or weaponry. Even simple acts, like choosing the safest path across a ledge or predicting a predator's movement, became pivotal moments. Humans realized that their greatest challenge was not just physical danger, it was the need to understand, anticipate, and respect the intelligence of a species perfectly adapted to this world. As the confrontation intensified, environmental hazards increased. Sudden storms flooded sections of the canyon with acidic water. Rocks dislodged, creating falling hazards, and sharp cliffs made navigation deadly. The Deathworlders seemed to use the environment as an extension of themselves, appearing where the terrain amplified their advantage and disappearing where the humans might least expect. The humans' physical endurance was tested to its limits. Exhaustion, injuries, and mental fatigue became constant companions. Yet these challenges also reinforced teamwork. Humans relied on each other for support, covering blind spots, communicating silently, and guiding one another through dangerous passages. The Deathworlders, through their subtle mastery, forced the humans to become more cohesive, more aware, and more adaptable than they had ever been. One of the pivotal moments came when the humans had to cross a narrow ledge high above the canyon floor with no room for error. A misstep could send someone plummeting into jagged rocks below. The Deathworlders observed from both sides, using the shadows to manipulate human perception of distance, depth, and timing. The human squad had to coordinate movements perfectly, relying on verbal cues, intuition, and prior knowledge of the environment. Every small movement was deliberate. Every step was calculated. One wrong action could trigger a cascade of failures. Yet the humans successfully navigated the ledge by combining patience, observation, and courage. This moment became a defining lesson. Survival depended on mental acuity and adaptability just as much as physical skill. Throughout the climax, humans also learned the importance of humility. The Deathworlders' actions were a constant reminder that superiority was relative. Humans had entered this world thinking technology and intellect alone could secure dominance. Yet the Deathworlders demonstrated that adaptation, instinct, and intimate knowledge of the environment were equally critical. Every encounter, every maneuver, and every observation forced humans to question their assumptions and adjust their approach. The apex beings did not need to attack recklessly. Their presence and strategic mastery were enough to teach humans lessons that could not be learned from simulations or controlled environments. The humans' retreat from the canyon was both strategic and humbling. They had faced one of the most challenging environments in the galaxy, endured tests designed to expose weaknesses, and survived encounters that pushed them to the limits of endurance and mental resilience. Yet the experience left them transformed. Confidence born of arrogance had been replaced with a measured, cautious understanding of the universe. Humans now realized that the Deathworlders' supremacy was not simply physical but holistic. It encompassed intelligence, instinct, adaptability, and intimate knowledge of an environment designed to punish mistakes. As the expedition moved away from the central canyon, humans reflected on the lessons learned. The Deathworlders had forced them to rethink assumptions about dominance, strength, and survival. Technology, while valuable, could not replace observation, intuition, or teamwork. Brute force could not overcome experience and instinct. Humans began to internalize the understanding that the galaxy was filled with species and environments where success depended not on arrogance but on humility, learning, and respect. These realizations reshaped their thinking about exploration, conflict, and interaction with apex species. The climax of the mission also strengthened the human team. The shared experience of navigating life-threatening terrain, surviving encounters with apex predators, and adapting under constant pressure forged stronger bonds among the crew. Leaders emerged who could think critically and remain calm under extreme stress. Team members developed a shared language of trust, signals, and coordination that allowed them to operate efficiently despite environmental chaos. These lessons in cooperation and adaptation were invaluable. teaching humans that survival depended as much on social cohesion as on individual skill. By the conclusion of Part 4, the humans had reached a point of transformation. The Deathworlders had demonstrated why they were apex beings, not through reckless violence, but through strategic mastery, environmental adaptation, and intelligence. Humans had survived, learned, and grown, but they had also been humbled. They now understood that every world, every species, and every encounter demanded respect, observation, and adaptability. The climax had proved that dominance in the universe was never absolute. It was earned, maintained, and constantly tested. Humans returned from the heart of the death world changed, wiser, and more aware of the fragile balance between confidence and humility. In a galaxy ruled by apex species. After the climactic confrontation with the death, the human team returned from the planet's most dangerous regions physically exhausted, mentally taxed, and profoundly changed. The journey back to their base was quieter than usual. The usual chatter and scientific debate were replaced by reflective silence. Every member of the crew was processing what they had experienced, what they had learned, and how their understanding of the universe had shifted. The once confident and somewhat arrogant explorers now carried with them the heavy weight of humility, a respect for life forms beyond human comprehension, and a realization of their own limitations. It was clear to all that they had not merely survived, they had been transformed by their experiences. The return journey provided space for introspection. As the humans traveled through orbit and back to their colony, they replayed moments from the expedition in their minds. The sudden collapses of rocky terrain, the near-fatal encounters in the canyon, and the graceful but lethal movements of the death. Each memory carried a lesson. The team recognized that the Deathworlder supremacy was not a matter of sheer power or weaponry, but a combination of intelligence, instinct, adaptability, and intimate knowledge of their environment. They had been challenged in ways humans had rarely experienced, forced to adapt under extreme pressure and to understand the subtle cues of a species that could survive, thrive, and dominate the deadliest conditions in the galaxy. Humans began to rethink the assumptions that had guided their mission from the start. For years, humanity had believed that advanced technology and cleverness alone could secure their place as the apex species of the galaxy. Ships, weapons, and scientific knowledge had been their tools and symbols of dominance. Yet on this planet, these advantages proved limited. The Deathworlders had shown that survival required more than intelligence. It required an understanding of the environment, respect for the native species, and the ability to anticipate dangers instinctively. This realization sparked debates and discussions among the crew. As they tried to articulate the profound truths they had discovered, the psychological impact of the expedition became increasingly evident. Some crew members struggled with anxiety, haunted by memories of near misses, treacherous terrain, and the silent, calculating presence of the death. Others found themselves reflecting on humanity's place in the universe, feeling both humbled and inspired by what they had witnessed. The sense of superiority that had driven the mission was replaced by a more complex understanding that in a galaxy filled with life, strength and intelligence were only meaningful when combined with adaptability, observation, and respect. The Deathworlders had not sought to destroy humans. Instead, they had taught a lesson far more valuable than victory or defeat. Back at the colony, the returning team was greeted with curiosity, admiration, and skepticism. Officials, scientists, and civilians alike were eager to hear stories of the Deathworlders, to learn about the extreme environments, and to understand the implications of human encounters with an apex species. The humans recounted their experiences in detail, emphasizing not just the dangers they faced, but the insights they had gained. They spoke of the Deathworlders' mastery of their environment, their strategic intelligence, and their ability to survive in conditions that would have killed most other life forms instantly. These accounts inspired awe, but also a sense of caution, reminding humanity that the universe was far more complex and unpredictable than previously believed. The lessons learned extended beyond survival. The expedition prompted a re-evaluation of how humanity approached exploration, conflict, and interaction with other species. Humans realized that arrogance and assumptions of dominance could lead to disaster. Every encounter in the galaxy, they now understood, required careful observation, patience, and an appreciation for the unique strengths of other life forms. The Deathworlders had demonstrated that mastery was earned through understanding and adaptation, not through force alone. Humanity's explorers returned with a renewed sense of purpose, committed to approaching the unknown with humility, strategy, and respect. Scientists in the human colony began to study the data collected during the expedition with fresh perspectives. They analyzed patterns of Deathworlder behavior, environmental adaptations, and survival strategies. These studies revealed astonishing insights. The Deathworlders had evolved not only physically but mentally, optimizing every aspect of their existence to endure extreme conditions. Their movements, reactions, and decisions were shaped by generations of survival in an environment designed to punish mistakes. Humans recognized that the Deathworlders were not anomalies, but examples of life perfected by relentless adaptation. This understanding reshaped scientific thinking, emphasizing the importance of context, environment, and instinct in defining apex species. The expedition also had a profound effect on human culture and philosophy. Stories of the journey, the challenges faced, and the lessons learned became a source of reflection and inspiration. Writers, educators, and leaders used the experiences to highlight the value of humility, patience, and adaptability. Humanity began to see itself not as the uncontested ruler of the galaxy, but as one species among many, capable of learning, growing, and thriving only when it respected the strengths of others. The Deathworlders became symbols of ultimate survival, reminding humans that mastery was not granted, it was earned through experience, understanding, and resilience. Among the crew, personal transformations were evident. Explorers who had once relied on confidence and bravado now emphasized careful planning, observation, and teamwork. Soldiers and strategists recognized the limitations of weapons when faced with intelligence and instinct. Scientists appreciated the importance of hands-on learning and environmental awareness, understanding that true knowledge extended beyond equations and simulations. The journey had created a new generation of humans who were both cautious and courageous, capable of navigating extreme challenges while maintaining respect for the life forms and environments they encountered. Humanity's approach to future exploration began to shift. Rather than assuming dominance, humans prioritized learning, observation, and strategic adaptation. New training programs were developed to prepare explorers for encounters with apex species, emphasizing situational awareness, environmental analysis, and cooperation. Technological advancements were paired with a focus on intuition and decision-making under uncertainty. Humans had learned that success in the galaxy depended not on arrogance or strength, but on the ability to adapt, respect, and survive alongside other powerful species. The Deathworlders example became a benchmark for what humans aspired to understand, if not emulate. Reflection on the expedition also inspired ethical considerations. Humans recognized the importance of respecting alien life and environments, understanding that interference or aggression could have catastrophic consequences. The Deathworlders had demonstrated that intelligence and adaptability were intertwined with the stewardship of one's own environment. Humans realized that to thrive in the galaxy, they needed to balance ambition with caution, curiosity with respect, and strength with wisdom. These insights reshaped policies and approaches to interstellar exploration, emphasizing coexistence, learning, and strategic patience. In addition to the intellectual and philosophical lessons, the expedition reinforced the importance of teamwork and human connection. The crew had survived through collaboration, mutual trust, and communication. Each person's skills were vital. No individual could have succeeded alone. This realization strengthened relationships within the team and highlighted the value of unity when facing extreme adversity. Humans began to appreciate that survival was as much about social cohesion as physical capability or technological advantage. The Deathworlders had, in their own way, forced humans to discover the power of cooperation under pressure over time. The story of the expedition spread across human colonies and star systems. People were captivated by the accounts of a species that thrived in the most hostile conditions imaginable. A species that challenged humans not through aggression but through mastery of its environment. The tale became a legend, inspiring awe, respect, and a sense of humility in humans. The Deathworlders were no longer just myths or distant curiosities. They were a living testament to what it meant to survive and dominate in a universe that was far harsher than humans had imagined. Ultimately, the expedition changed humanity's understanding of itself. Humans realized that, while they were clever, resourceful, and capable, they were not invincible. Strength without understanding, technology without adaptability, and arrogance without humility were insufficient to guarantee survival. The Deathworlders had taught a lesson that would endure for generations. True mastery required intelligence, instinct, adaptability, and respect for life in all its forms. Humans left the Deathworld changed, not merely as explorers who had survived, but as students of a species that had perfected existence under the harshest conditions. The expedition's legacy was profound. Scientific studies, philosophical debates, and cultural narratives all emphasized the lessons learned. Humans had faced one of the universe's apex species and survived, not through conquest, but through adaptation, observation, and cooperation. The experience underscored that survival and success in the galaxy depended on humility, strategic thinking, and respect for beings whose abilities and intelligence could surpass human expectations. The Deathworlders remained a symbol of apex mastery, challenging humans to reconsider their place in the cosmos and inspiring them to approach the unknown with both courage and reverence. By the time humans fully returned to their regular lives, the memory of the Deathworld remained vivid. Every human who had experienced the expedition carried with them a transformed perspective. Confidence had evolved into measured strength. Arrogance had been replaced with humility. Curiosity had been tempered with respect. Humans had survived, learned, and grown, and the galaxy itself had revealed a truth that could not be ignored. Dominance was temporary, mastery was earned, and life, in all its complexity, demanded both intelligence and adaptability. The expedition closed with a deep sense of reflection. humanity had ventured into a world designed to challenge them, encountered beings whose abilities were beyond imagination, and survived not by force, but through learning, adaptation, and cooperation. The Deathworlders had proven themselves apex beings, and humans had proven their ability to learn from true masters of survival. The lessons carried forward respect, humility, adaptability, and strategic thinking became guiding principles for future exploration. Humanity had been tested, transformed, and enlightened, forever changed by the apex species that had quietly and gracefully challenged them.